One of the reasons that we watch movies or read fiction books is that we like to kind of imagine what it would be like to be in those kinds of places. You know, you watch a spy movie, you read a spy book, and you think, what would it be like to be a spy? What would it be like to have all that knowledge and to just kind of innately know what to do? Or you watch a movie about people in fighter jets, you think, man, what would it be like to be a fighter pilot? We like that idea of kind of imagining what that might be like. Or what would it be like to be a world traveler? You maybe watch a video and you say, well, I'd just love to see that in person. We like to kind of learn from someone who went before us, someone who kind of did that, and they tell us what it was like, because we kind of like, in some ways, to live by proxy. They're become guides for us, the people that can do the things that we maybe never, ever will have a chance to. And there's a reason that many jobs have on-the-job training, because they want to show you around. They don't just want to hand you a book and say, okay, here's the job, now do it. They want to actually see they want to actually show you what to do. You need guides. And we see that in life, that idea of having someone to help us through life is so, so important. And probably the greatest influence in your life in that way is your parents. Are your parents, however you grew up, those people that acted as your parents. And maybe some of you were raised by your grandparents. Maybe some of you had kind of a mixture of a lot of different parental figures in your life. Maybe some of you even grew up in a foster care system. But the idea that you have someone in your life who's going to show you the next step and show you life. We think of our parents and we think to ourselves, that's probably the way it's going to go for me. I'll just share this with you, and I think maybe I have already, but my sister took a genetic test and found out that there's this gene mutation which explains why my mother's side of the family is just full of cancer. And she told me that, if you do this thing, you can get this test and you can find out if you have this gene mutation or not. And I can't tell you how relieved I was to find out that there's a possibility I don't have this gene mutation. Because I just assumed my mom got cancer, stage 4 cancer, when she was 51. And I just turned 46 on Monday. And so in the back of my mind, I think, well, it's 5 more years till I get that I'm going to sit down with the doctor and he's going to say you have cancer. And I'm going to say, yeah, I know. It's going to be just inevitable. Why? Because I just think, well, I don't know how else. That's the way it happened with my mom. It's probably the way it's going to go with me. Now, there's no logic to it. It's just like we kind of look into the void and we say, what's that going to be like? And the person that we look to for the answer to that is our parent. One of our parents is going to show us that way forward. Maybe for you, you say, as a young person, I want to be just like my dad, or I'm going to do things just like my mom. Maybe for you, you say, boy, I had some examples in my life, but not the kind of examples I want to follow. I know the right thing to do because I saw how many times the wrong thing was, and I want to avoid that at all costs. Either way, your parents are a guide for you, an example. You can imagine the way it's going to be because you have some real-life flesh examples in front of you. And even as you get older, you look to your parents to see how they were at the end of their lives and how they did. Conversely, then, we also realize that there are people looking at us, too. Not just us looking ahead, but we look behind us, and there are people looking at us as well. And I think Father's Day is a good day to remember that there are people watching you. Can I encourage you? Maybe your kids are not in your life on a regular basis. Maybe some of you are even estranged from your children. Can I say that there are people in this church that are watching you? They want to know, what does a saint at 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 look like? They're looking for an example from you, and I'll just encourage you, like I do every week, to remember that there are children, young people, young adults watching your example. And as we think about that, I want to ask you some questions. What kind of example are you setting? What kind of standard are you putting out there that other people can follow? What kind of active training are you doing? What kind of leading are you doing? What goals do you have for your children or for others watching you to attain? Have you ever thought about that? I think about my parenting very much in terms of goals. And Amy and I are very much goal-oriented, but I remember talking just early on about kind of what we wanted out of a family and children, and we pursued those goals, and I'll talk about that here this morning. But the idea is that we're leading toward a goal. We're leading toward a destination. And I want to put that just in front of you here, that's largely what parenting is. It's follow me. I know the way. And if I don't know the way, I want to show you at least the path that I can't go on. I'm looking at Caleb, and Caleb is definitely he might look similar to me, but he's very different from me. And I'm in awe that he wants to be an entrepreneur. Never something that I would ever have the courage to do, just to go out and start his own business and buy this expensive piece of equipment and just go and move somewhere else. I don't have the courage to do that, so I'm in awe of him. I want him to do more than what I've done. I can't guide him there, but I can guide him in some other areas. And the Bible presents parenting as not something that is passive, like so many people in our society think of. Parenting is what happens to you. Oh, great, now I've got to raise these kids. But an active, something you get to do, something that you do. Parenting is not something that happens to you, it's something that you do. And not only that, but we're supposed to be an active participant in our parenting as well. So it says in Deuteronomy chapter 6, and I realize it's Old Testament, it's Israel, yada, yada, yada. However, here's the principle. Parents ought to take an active role with their children. And so it says in Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 5 through 7, thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and with all thy soul and with all thy might. And these words which I have commanded thee this day shall be in thine heart. And thou shalt teach them diligently unto thy children, and shalt talk of them when thou sittest in thine house, and when thou walkest by the way, and when thou liest down, and when thou risest up. Basically, all the time, be teaching, guiding, moving your children toward goals of godliness, to love the Lord thy God. Proverbs chapter 3, verse 1. Of course, Proverbs is written as an older man, Solomon, to a younger man, his son, Rehoboam, or whoever. He says in Proverbs 3, verse 1, my son, forget not my law, but let thine heart keep my commandments. And so we see here in Ephesians chapter 6, verse number 4, this admonition for us, ye fathers, provoke not your children to wrath, but bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. I'm just going to look at that one verse today, and really pretty briefly, and we'll be done. First of all, notice that it starts with a negative. Right out of the gate, fathers, provoke not your children to wrath. So again, while you are parenting, do it in such a way as to not provoke your children to wrath. Now, why does it start with a negative? I can give you at least 3 reasons why. There's probably more, but these are my 3 reasons. 1, it starts with a negative because the trend in a sinful world is always toward the negative. We understand that it's not just like, it would be easy enough if it was just raise your kids, but raise your kids having your own sinful tendencies and your children who also have sinful tendencies in a world that is pulling us away from God and toward sinful tendencies. So as it were, the deck is stacked against you. And you understand that. And so he's trying to say, first of all, don't give way to the trend of negativity, of provoking them to anger. Kids are sinners being raised by sinners. And so as such, there are many chances for sin. And I don't want you necessarily as a parent to dwell too much on the ways that you failed your children, but except to say, that's the way that it often goes. The chance of failure is pretty high because we're sinners and we're going to sin against our children. And do the kids see the best of us or the worst of us? I think the answer is yes. But it's also true that they often remember the worst of us. So that's one of the reasons he starts off with, don't provoke your children to wrath, because there's a tendency toward the negative. Second is because there's a wrong way to do it. There are a lot of people that are like, it doesn't matter how you parent. It super does. It really, really does matter how you parent. And you can't just be like, I'm sure it'll all work out, because someone else pulled it off. Hey, my parents were terrible, and look how I turned out. Yeah. Maybe you look a little harder, Let's not discount God's grace. Listen, I had wonderful parents, and I still needed massive amounts of God's grace. And when I pray for my own parenting and my children, I've tried to do the best I could. I've tried to follow what God says. I've had Amy as a wonderful partner to try to raise our kids, and yet still always prayed for God's grace. God, I need your help, right? Because there is a wrong way to do it. And we should just recognize that That's sometimes the ones that we grab, the ones that we reach for. We've all seen what bad parenting looks like. Have you ever seen some interaction between a parent and a child and thought, you're going to let them get away with that? Right? Or you've seen in the stores the screamers, the threateners. It always bothers me when I see some parent, like they're in Walmart or something, and they're like, if you don't be quiet, I'm going to leave you here. And I'm like, why would you terrorize your kids like that? You're like, well, it's just whatever it takes. No, I'm saying there's a wrong way to parent. That's the wrong way to parent. We don't do that. We don't threaten our kids like that. There's a right way to do it. You say, well, the end is the same. They come with me. And I'm saying, no, parenting cannot be pragmatic. I've heard parents like, well, I got my kids, they're 18 now, they're alive. It's like, that was the bar to get them alive to 18. That's the bar. That's the wrong way to parent. I mean, good grief. Social services can do that, and sometimes they have to. Sometimes they have to step in. We all know the way that we were parented. If we're real honest, we all know the way that we wish we would have been parented. Like I said, I had wonderful parents, and I don't know if my dad's going to watch this or not, but I still thought to myself, I'm not doing it that way. I wish my dad had done it this way. I wish my mom had thought of it this way. And you know what? The terrifying thing is my kids are going to do the same thing. My dad was pretty good, but man, I wish he would have been like this. I wish he would have done like this. And man, I think about that and I just think, yeah, there is a wrong way to do it. So the Bible says, don't provoke your children to wrath. Here, the wrong way is to provoke them to wrath. The word provoke means anger along. The word provoke them to wrath is actually one word in the Greek, and it means to anger alongside, to heat them up alongside. And I think the idea is if you parent when you're angry, you're going to make them angry as well. And I see a lot of parenting in anger. I see a lot of parenting, and I'm guilty of it. Ask my kids, ask my wife. I've been guilty of it as well. By the grace of God, I've gotten some great victories in that area. But I understand the idea of taking things way too personally, dads, and parenting in anger. And the only thing that does is stoke them to anger or discouragement as well. That's another reason that it starts off with a negative. Don't provoke your children to wrath. It starts with a negative because there's a trend toward the sinful, because there's a wrong way to do it, and also just because carelessness in parenting will lead to anger. So Ephesians and Colossians are kind of parallel books. They follow the same stream of thought, and the wording is almost identical in a few different places. And here in Ephesians chapter 6, verse 4, paralleled with Colossians chapter 3, verse 21, it says the same thing. Fathers, don't provoke provoking your children to anger. And then it says, lest they be discouraged. It doesn't say that here, but in the parallel passage it says, lest they be discouraged. And it means to make them spiritless, to feel like they're never going to measure up. They just can't do it. Doesn't matter what I do, my dad is never going to think well of me. The goalposts are always moving. It's never going to be good enough. And that's discouraging for children. That provokes them to anger. The unintentional parenting frustrates children because they don't know the rules. They don't know the expectations. They can never meet them. You ever had a job where the boss does not explain to you, men, what you're supposed to do, but he screams at you when you do it the wrong way? Isn't that frustrating? Not just frustrating. Guys, can we all admit, doesn't that make you mad? I don't have to take this. Yeah, you're right. You shouldn't have to take that. But then what do we do with our kids? We don't explain to them. We just are always mad all the time that they're not doing what we expect them to do. Well, have you explained it? Have you put any kind of if you don't do this, this is what will happen to you attached with it? Well, if you haven't, then you might just be kind of grinding your kids down. There's a wrong way to do it. You don't feel like maybe they're important. They're not going to feel like you think they're important because there's no effort put into it. Listen, I've seen disciplined kids and undisciplined kids, and it's this strange thing, but undisciplined kids, you'd think they'd be the happiest kids in the world. They get everything they want, and they're the most miserable. Disciplined kids, because they know their parents care, they give a rip about the way that they're growing. Because of that, then they're going to be happier. Just by virtue of, my parents care about me. They have these rules in place for me. Inconsistency reflects God poorly. One of the things that I'm trying to do as a parent, again, imperfectly, is I want to reflect the character of God. And as I'll talk about this in a little bit, they're not going to have me around forever, but they're always going to have God the Father. And so I want to make sure that when they think about God the Father, that I'm not that far behind. You say, that's pretty presumptuous. Oh, no. That's what God says, right? We're supposed to reflect him. We're supposed to be holy as I am holy, right? We're supposed to be following in that step where we're being made into the image of Christ. We're supposed to reflect the character of the Father. So it's not hubris at all for me to say, I want to be like God in his character in my parenting, because I want my children to have a better example of what a father is. And when I'm inconsistent, that doesn't show the character of God at all, because he's always consistent. That's the way that it is with him. He's changeless. Now, that's the negative, and it starts right out of the gate. Fathers, provoke not thy children to wrath. But then it follows it up with two positive commands. So let's just move and transition on to those as well. And he says, instead of provoking your children to wrath, one, bring them up in the nurture of the Lord. The word bring them up means literally out of pampering or out of stiffening or fattening. And the idea is kind of bringing it up. So what you might do with a plant or an animal, you want this thing to grow. And so you do whatever, you create the right conditions to make it come to the fullness and maturity. That's the idea. Bring them up. Do whatever it takes. It is intentional caretaking of our children. Listen, and I think part of it is this, because you go back to verse number 1, children obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. And we all say as parents, yeah, I'm glad that verse is there, right? But here's the thing, we want our kids to obey. The question is, how do they obey? Right? They have to obey, otherwise they're sinning against God. So let's as parents make it as easy for them as we can. We want them to obey. Let's give them every tool that we can to make it easy for them to obey. Not hard, difficult for them to obey. We watch over things that are precious to us. You go online, you get a Ring camera, and you set it up, and you spend all this time figuring out what the best angle is so that you can keep a track of your stuff. And you might get a notification on your phone, and, oh, someone's trying to break into my stuff, or someone's out on the trail cam, or someone's out there, and they're doing this thing. We get camera to protect the things that we love. You have a portfolio, and you're wondering how your stocks and how your 401k is doing, and you've got this app on your phone, and you're kind of looking into it, or you call your broker and say, how are things today? And we're just kind of checking in on it and looking over it. Or you're driving your car, and you're just listening for little noises, anything that's going to make it seem like there's something wrong that you have to fix, right? It's always, and some of you, yeah, amen, I know that. I just ignore it, but the check engine light is just so I can see what I'm reading. That's all it is. But I get all that. What I'm saying is this: we take care of the things that are important to us. But then when it comes to parenting, we're just kind of like, oh, I'm sure it'll be fine. No. Bring them up. Bring them up. Put intention into what you're doing with them. Now, he says bring them up in, first of all, the nurture of the Lord. And the word nurture, it's paideia. It's just the name for a child. It's the idea of tutoring or educating. Bring them through the regular process of growth. The Bible says of Jesus in Luke chapter 2 that he grew in wisdom and stature and in knowledge of the Lord. I don't have it with me. This is just not on my notes. So if you give me just a second, I'll get there. What it says specifically is that Jesus increased in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and man. That's the natural way it should go. And so we're just to bring them along in that process. Now, it's more of an idea of disciplining and chastening or correction when there's something wrong. We have to know then, first of all, what the right way is if we're going to steer them in that way. First of all, you have to know God's way. What actions does he want from us? Do you know, Christian parent, what are Christian words? What are Christian actions? What are Christian attitudes? What are Christian outlooks? Do you know them so that you can teach them? What does God want? And let's not get in this trap of, it doesn't matter as long as you're saved. It doesn't matter what you do. No, it does matter. Most of the New Testament is written to believers to grow in their faith, to say, this is what God expects from you. You have to follow this path. not in a legalistic sort of way. Listen, I'm not saying if you do these things, you'll be saved. I'm saying as a saved person, you do these things. Here's the difference, right? Here's the difference between true Christianity, where we live by the grace of God in the commands of God, and fake Christianity that says this is how you earn merit with God. The difference is this, that when I say I'm going to try to live as a Christian, I'm saying because I have been born again, because I've been made new, now I have the ability to live for God. Religion says, here's a list of things, try your hardest to do those things, and that always, always, always fails because we can't do it. We're sinners. And the same thing for when you came to know Christ, you tried to live your life the best you could by yourself and tried to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, and you know that it failed and failed and failed. You had to come to a point where you said, I can't do this anymore. I can't save myself. I'll never be good enough to get to heaven. And that's when God says, good, you've come to that point. The good news is that, the bad news is rather, that if you think that you can earn your way to heaven, then you will live your whole life thinking that you're going to be good enough, and when you die, you'll end up in the lake of fire. Because there's only one person who's ever been good enough to get to heaven, and that's the Lord Jesus Christ. And what he did for us, we couldn't do for ourselves. He lived a perfect life. And he went to the cross, and he offers you his righteousness and offers to take your sins on himself. And you right now where you are, you can say, God, I accept that free gift of salvation. I accept the sacrifice of Christ on the cross. I'm not going to try to work my way to heaven anymore. I'm just going to take your free gift of salvation. By faith, you can have it right now. You don't have to come up here and pray. You don't have to do any kind of incantation, any kind of, Latin mass, anything like that. You can just, where you are, trust Christ and believe him and accept that free gift of salvation. And if you do, you'll be saved. This is what we're talking about as a saved person, to try to find out what is God's way and try to walk in that and to try to teach that. Do you know what the Bible says about different topics? Do you know what the Bible says about how, and I understand there's a lot the Bible doesn't talk about. You still, as a parent, need to know wisdom. But as a father, are you in Proverbs? Proverbs is such a good book just for wisdom, to know the right way to teach our children to be. Do you know God's way? Second, do you know your way? Your way should reflect his way, because again, the Bible fleshes out quite a bit, but it doesn't give us everything. And so, what are the core values in your house? Whenever I'm doing family counseling, I ask, what are the things that are the most important in your house? And just for a moment, I want you to think about, what are the most important things in our house? And if you're a parent, what are the things that we are trying to teach our children? What are the things that make the core principles of our family? I'll share ours in a little bit, and I'll share some ones that I think are good and ones that maybe aren't very good. But just think about this. What are the core values in your home? For our family, we have made one of the most important things gratitude. We want our children to say thank you for the things they have. We want them to express gratitude to others for what they've done, and especially to God. And part of what Amy and I do on a regular basis, we just express our thanks to God for what he's done. We want to have a family that is grateful for the things that we have. We've worked hard to foster an attitude of gratitude. Another value in our house is service to others. That we are glad to give of ourselves to others, to serve others. And this was true before I was a pastor. This would be true if I wasn't a pastor. We believe in serving others, and that we are part of the reasons we are here is to love others, and we do that through service. One of our core values at our house is hard work, and sometimes we get a little imbalanced with that. We do take time to relax when we need to, but hard work is very important to us. We want our children to be hard workers. And we're always glad when our children get a job somewhere and we hear from the people, especially if they don't know us very well, they're like, man, your kids are really hard workers. We're like, yeah, all right. Some of those core principles have taken root. We're glad for that. Maybe some of your core principles are generosity. We are just giving. That's what we do. We just foster that idea of giving. Maybe, unintentionally, some of your core principles are criticism or complaining. That there's always looking for something that's wrong. And you teach that to your children as well. When the Bible says, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he's old, he won't depart from it, that goes either way. That goes both ways. They learn to be generous. They learn to be critical. Maybe for you, it's greediness, conflict. I've had contact with families where one of their core values is conflict. I mean, they just can't stop fighting. And I don't understand that. We've worked really, really hard to really try to get rid of all that. Our kids don't fight. And they might pick at each other a little bit, but if there's a conflict, we're going to be right in the middle of it. We're going to help them to settle it. I even give them the option, listen, you guys can work this out yourself, or I can get in the middle of it and help you, but you're going to get this figured out. We're not going to just let you be angry. Those two, they just don't get along. Nope. But some families, it's conflict is the name of the game. Drama is the name of the game. That's one of their core values. For some families, having a victim mentality. For some families, having an air of superiority. Those are core values. And let me ask, what are your core values? And if you say, I don't know, then probably your kids don't either. Or they're picking up on all the wrong ones. It's good for you to identify, what are our core values? What makes our family our family? How then are you expressing them? How are you reminding them of those core values? Yes, it has to be lived out consistently, but also talked about in your home. When it's no surprise that when we read the Bible together as a family, and we don't do it as often as we should, I'll be the first to confess that. But when we do, we talk about these core values, these things that are important to us. And it seems like, everything kind of flows back to those things. When you're in your alone time, when you're sitting around the fire, what are the things that you're talking about, those core values, those ways that you should walk? You're bringing them up in the nurture of the Lord. I'll say, too, I just think it's really important for there to be a consensus between parents. How are we going to handle this? And I was talking with Amy just this morning and just expressing my gratitude that we've always been on the same page. There's always been deference. Even when we feel like maybe the other one isn't handling it quite right, there's not been any kind of public, I think that's wrong. We just have had real deference toward one another and been on the same page as much as we can be. And it's worked out really, really well. So to bring them up in the nurture of the Lord, and then finally to bring them up in the admonition of the Lord. At the root of the word is the word admonish, which is, it's actually from two words in the Greek, nous, which means thinking, and tithemi, which means place. To bring them to the place where they should, to bring them to a certain way of thinking. It means to bring to mind or bring to remembrance, to put these things before their mind all the time. It means that you are shaping the way that they think. And you say, well, you advocating brainwashing your kids? Yes, that is what I'm saying. Yep. Because kids, their hands, their feet, their brains are dirty. They need to be washed. And so, not brainwashing in the strictest sense, but am I unapologetically training the kids in the way that they should think? Yes. Not just because I like it that way. I don't have some kind of power trip. No, that's my job. It's my job to help my kids think in a certain way. It's your job to make sure that your kids are thinking in a certain way. That's important. That's not accidental. That's not a bug. It's a feature of parenting. I'm shaping the way that you think about God, about the world, about others. I'm shaping the way that you think about faith in the Bible. You say, well, how do you do that? How do you shape minds? Well, you can't just let kids believe how they want. So it takes convincing. When the kids are young, you have a wonderful advantage. They believe everything you say. We were just talking about how I was joking with Jacob years ago, and I wasn't even thinking about it, but I just told him that when you get to be 100, you start all over at 1. And he believed me. I was totally joking, but he totally believed me. And there's a lot of little things like that where we've just kind of said, and the funny thing is just I never thought no kid is that dumb. No, I'm just kidding. Just kids believe what you have to say. So when they're little, you have this wonderful advantage to say the things that they're going to listen to. I was joking, Jacob. They believe everything you say. So when they're young and you say, because I said so, that works. I know some parents are really against because I said so. No, that's a great thing to say when they're little. Right? You don't have to reason with them. Well, Socrates once said, no, just well, that's the way it's going to be. So that's it, Now, as they get older, then you have to actually convince them. It's good. Not just because you have to convince them, well, I got to win this battle. You can win all the battles. It's the point of, okay, now I'm asking you to act in this way. Why is that important? Here's the core value behind why I'm telling you to do this. I want you to act in this way. Why? Because of this. I'm trying to convince them. I'm laying out a path. And when they're young, you have their heart, you can tell them this is the way that it's going to be. As they get older, again, you have to have good and better reasons. But even then, you're shaping their thinking. And I know that it's harder to do when your kids are 40 and 50. And you're like, oh man, they're just not going to listen to anything I say. I promise you that they are listening. And that by God's grace, you can still convince them. You can still shape the way that they think because they're still looking to you as the guide who's going before them. You still have a role in that, and please don't abdicate. It might seem like they're not listening. It might seem a long time since you've heard, Dad, you're right. Mom, the more I think about it, the more I think you're right. It might be a long time since you've heard that, and yet they're still listening and thinking about it. It takes convincing, and also it takes demonstration. They'll pick up what you believe by how it works in your life. And it's just important for you to understand that consistency and living out the principles that you really believe. And maybe it is that when you were raising your kids when they were little, I'm talking to you older parents especially, maybe it was that when you were, when your kids were younger, that you made some awful mistakes. Maybe you didn't even know Christ. And so there's a little bit of like, well, I didn't know what to do, but it would be a wonderful thing for your children to see the difference that Christ has made in your life. And to show the power of that change. Being able to admit, hey, I didn't do these things right. It's okay to apologize for the things that you've done wrong. It's okay to say, yeah, that was not right. It was a couple years ago. We got into a little bit of something with our neighbor. And it was kind of a misunderstanding, but it made me really mad that our neighbor would accuse us of doing something we didn't do. And so it was just kind of like, forget it. We're not gonna even just don't talk to them. Don't have anything to do with them. And I realized it's like the Lord just dogged me, just wouldn't let me go. That's one of your core principles: serve others and love others. And this person doesn't know Christ, but you're just gonna like tell all your kids to not talk to them, not have anything to do with them. And I'm like. So I went over to our neighbor and I said, listen, I want to get this worked out. I haven't been acting in the right way, and so please forgive me for that. And what do we have to do to make this right? Then I had to go back over, across the street and talk to our kids and bring them all together and say, that wasn't right of me. I did the wrong thing by not going to them first. I've gone to talk to them, and we're going to work this out, and I want you to be kind to them and love them. And I had to admit I was wrong. But you either take the witness stand against yourself, or they're going to have someone who's going to be on the witness stand against you. And if you can go up and say, yeah, that was wrong. I'm holding up this standard. I'm admitting that I didn't make that standard. I missed it. That's going to go a long, long way to live that out and take demonstration. It also then just takes consistency. That is, I think, one of the hardest things for parents. I know it's been one of my big, big struggles is consistency. We all have great ideas for the way this is going to go. And it's great for like 2 weeks, right? And then we go right back into the patterns. So to build those patterns where it is a regular part of this is the way we do things. I know I'm talking to parents of young children, especially with these consistency things, but I'm telling you as older parents as well, that when your children can see that the work that Christ is doing in you consistently, not just for a little while. Oh yeah, Dad's calling me up. It must have been he went to a revival meeting at the church there. Must have been he heard a message. No, just like that regular, consistent, hey, there's been a real change in you. What is that? I want that. I promise God can use that in your life. If we will put in the time as parents, if we will say, I recognize my role as a guide to go before my children. They're watching me. They're following me. Not as well as I'd like, maybe better than I'd like. Maybe they've forgotten the things that I've done wrong and remembering the things that I've done right. Either way, we're saying, God, use me to influence my children. God tells us here, fathers, provoke not your children to wrath. There's the negative, but here's the positive. Bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. Let God fill in those blanks for you here this morning as we talk about the importance of parenting.